Desde que lançou o Homem de Ferro em 2008, a Marvel embalou um sucesso atrás do outro e criou a fundação do que veio a se tornar um dos maiores universos do mundo dos cinemas. Para seu 10º lançamento, programado para 2014, a empresa decidiu inovar e produziu seu maior risco até então, Guardiões da Galáxia. O filme era baseado em um quadrinho completamente desconhecido pelo grande público. Ao contrário de suas produções anteriores, não estavam presentes personagens como o Capitão América ou o Homem de Ferro, que podiam não ser os favoritos dos leitores no passado, mas rapidamente viraram potências cinematográficas. Mas a Marvel precisava de um filme para expandir seus heróis para outros mundos e decidiu dar uma chance a esse quadrinho obscuro.
The fact that it's new, it really is an entirely new property, entirely new tone, entirely new cast of characters for us to bring to the screen, which we haven't done in a little while as we've been combining these characters and combining the universes. And it allows us to explore a whole subgenre of Marvel Comics, which is the cosmic side and the outer space adventures. I grew up a huge fan of those kind of movies and sort of always wanted to make one in the Marvel method, which Guardians absolutely is.
A produção começou a ganhar vida graças ao diretor James Gunn, que na época havia trabalhado apenas em filmes de baixo orçamento como o elogiado Super, que foi um fracasso de bilheteria. O máximo que ele havia feito na Marvel foi uma das cenas pós-créditos de Thor: O Mundo Sombrio, onde nem chegou a ser creditado. Quando soube do filme, ele preparou uma apresentação para o estúdio onde mostrava 20 páginas de ideias visuais, 10 páginas da sua metodologia e um documento de 42 páginas e o storyboard somente da primeira cena onde Star-Lord aparece dançando.
From the beginning, this movie was something that spoke to me because it really encompassed all the things I love in life. I love, space operas. I love Marvel comic books and Marvel superheroes. I love 70s pop music, and I love raccoons, which I really do love. When I was a kid, I had a raccoon figurine collection that, was my pride and joy. So for me, this honestly was a dream come true, and it was something that... And I try to say this with as little ego as possible, but I really felt like nobody else but me could tell this story because I felt like built to make this movie. I don't know what I'm going to do now that it's done. I really don't. I'm really happy that people are liking the movie and everything's going well. But on the other hand, it's sort of like, oh my God, how am I going to ever, have that experience with those great people that I worked with on this movie? This is a great experience for me.
Mesmo assim, a crítica estava cética de que o filme funcionaria. Afinal, o longa contava com uma árvore gigante que falava apenas uma frase e teria um guaxinim como um dos principais heróis. Porém, um dos maiores apoiadores do projeto foi ninguém menos que Joss Whedon, que na época era o consultor criativo da Marvel por conta do seu trabalho em Vingadores.
James is what makes me think it will work. I myself was sort of like, I liked Rocket Raccoon as a kid, but I'm not sure how that plays. And then they said, well, we're thinking about using James Gunn. I'm like, oh no, you're fine. Because, he is so off the wall and so crazy, but so smart, such a craftsman, builds from heart, loves the raccoon, needs the raccoon. And this is the guy who wrote the Specials, which is one of the most important movies about, people don't understand how influential that movie was about heroes, about, taking heroes and making them mundane. and Super. He's got a very twisted take on it, but it all comes from a real love of the material. So you know he's going to make that raccoon. You know, it's going to be hard for the humans to keep up.
You like the script too, or what you've seen so far?
James has barely started on it, so I want him to take it and make it very much his, because I know he's going to come from left field. I'm going to be like, what? And then be like, oh, of course, why didn't I think of that? And then I'm going to beat him.
A responsabilidade era grande e para que o filme desse certo, Gunn precisava ser cirúrgico na escolha do grupo, especialmente na escolha de um protagonista carismático para viver o Senhor das Estrelas. Boatos indicam que nomes como John Krasinski, Joseph Gordon-Levitt e Zachary Levi chegaram a ser cogitados para o papel, mas nenhum tinha o humor e o charme cafajeste exigido para Peter Quill. Foi então que a diretora de casting Sarah Finn sugeriu o nome de Chris Pratt, que era conhecido apenas como um coadjuvante de Parks and Recreation. Apesar da possibilidade de estrelar um filme da Marvel, Pratt inicialmente recusou a oportunidade. No passado, ele havia participado de um teste para G.I. Joe, onde apareceu acima do peso e estava com medo de mais uma vez passar vergonha na frente dos produtores.
People probably didn't see me. I'm not sure I even saw myself in this kind of a role. But what's really kind of nice about this movie, and I believe this, is that we did something with this movie that's never been done before. I think this is like unlike anything that's ever been done, and I think anyone who has seen this movie would agree. Maybe people wouldn't have seen me in this role, but that's because they weren't able to have the vision that kind of James had for what this could be, you know? And so he just told me in the audition, he was like, I'm just looking for someone to come in and just own this and just do their thing. And at the time, I'd been sort of having an identity crisis as an actor. I didn't know what I was, if I was a action guy, you know, or a comedy guy. And I thought maybe I could do a combination of both, but there's nothing out there that's like it. Maybe I have to develop something. And my manager just kept saying, Guardians of the Galaxy, man. I said,
why would you risk your life for this?
my mother gave it to me.
What do you do with it?
Do? Nothing. You listen to it. Or you can dance.
I'm a warrior and an assassin. I do not dance.
Really? The dancing? Wow. It's the greatest thing there is.
James Gunn também não estava convencido, e por isso o ator precisou fazer uma série de testes, e um deles trabalhou ao lado de Jason Momoa, que estava fazendo o teste para Drax. O futuro Aquaman foi tão bem que estava praticamente fechado para o papel, inclusive a produção chegou a criar uma arte conceitual com ele na pele do alienígena. Contudo, a negociação terminou por conta de divergências salariais. Chris Pratt seguiu realizando vários testes para o papel, e eventualmente chegou a trabalhar com um ex-lutador de luta livre chamado Dave Bautista, que havia feito apenas pequenas participações em outros filmes.
She betrayed Ronan. He doesn't like her. He wants her dead. You don't do his work for him. You keep her alive that way. Think about this, buddy. He gonna come back for her. And when he does, where's Drax gonna be? Waiting in the shadows. And then you can...
Why would I put my finger on his throat?
Oh, no, not... Oh, no, that's just an expression for slicing his throat.
I would not slice his throat. I would cut his head clean off.
Okay, yeah, I think you... She betrayed Ronan. He's coming back for her. And when he does, that's when you...
Why would I put my finger on his throat?
What? Oh, no, it's a symbol. This is a symbol for you slicing his throat.
I would not slice his throat. I would cut his head clean off.
It's a general expression for you killing somebody. You've heard of this. You've seen this, right? You know what that is.
Yeah.
Everyone knows.
No.
This is the first thing of the day? Yes. First thing of the day? First thing of the day. All right, let's have a great Thursday, everybody.
Assim que descobriu que finalmente foi confirmado, Pratt imediatamente entrou em uma dieta severa para perder cerca de 27 quilos em apenas 6 meses, e conquistou todos na Marvel com seu estilo único. O caminho de Bautista, por sua vez, foi um pouco mais longo. O ator precisou passar por uma série de audições, afinal seu personagem contava com uma maquiagem pesada e James Gunn e a produção só teriam noção de como ele ficaria na pele de Drax se ele se transformasse em Drax.
How many times did you have to audition for Guardians of the Galaxy?
I auditioned 10 million times. 4 auditions, 2 or 3 screen tests.
Oh my God.
And then some makeup tests and stuff. 2 makeup tests before I actually was given the role.
A maquiagem também seria um dos fatores principais para a outra personagem do longa, Gamora. Gunn sempre teve uma visão muito clara da heroína e por isso convidou Zoe Saldana para o papel.
This was my first experience getting makeup and prosthetics and paint on, because Avatar, everything was done in post, so I basically would come in at work and just work as is, and then they were all going to recreate it as soon as we were done shooting the movie. This one, you have to get up very, very early in the morning and go through 5 hours of makeup, and then you have ahead of you an entire day's worth of work. So it wasn't that much fun. But in the end, it was very rewarding.
Sister, help us fight Ronan. You know he's crazy. I know you're both crazy.
Além do elenco, uma das coisas que James Gunn precisava encontrar era um guaxinim. Sim, o diretor foi atrás de um animalzinho e descobriu o pequeno Oreo, que serviu de base para os animadores. Após entrar em contato com o animal, os criadores perceberam que precisavam fazer ajustes no modelo animado de Rocket Raccoon, mudando a forma como ele se movia e encontrando novas maneiras de reforçar o fato dele ser um experimento científico. Logo quando as gravações começaram, Bradley Cooper foi confirmado como dublador de Rocket, mas não poderia fazer o animal no set. Por isso o diretor contou com 2 pessoas para interpretá-lo durante as gravações. A primeira delas era Anand Arti-Shah, que usava uma máscara de Rocket no peito que serviu de guia para os atores no set. A outra pessoa que colaborou com o personagem foi o próprio irmão do diretor James Gunn, o Sean Gunn. O ator era mais do que um stand-in e o cineasta usou seu irmão como referência para os movimentos do herói, filmando tudo o que ele fazia. No fim das contas, a voz de Bradley Cooper foi a cereja no bolo do personagem, que virou uma mistura de dublador, Sean Gunn e o animalzinho.
I would have all of the traditional preparations that I would do as an actor, so I would know my lines and be familiar with the scene and know what was going on in the scene. And then in addition to that, I would try to find how I could best represent what Rocket was doing in that scene. The most important thing to me was always to make sure that my eyes were where Rocket's eyes would be ultimately in the scene. So I would then consult with the VFX supervisor. Am I in the right place?
You're taking the battery and you're affixing it to the armband that the prison guard had. You're fixing everything together.
Okay. I live for the simple things, like how much this is gonna hurt.
Bradley came in and added to that character and created another aspect of that character.
And anything he was doing, it was videotaped as well, and it was used consistently for reference, whether it's the facial gestures, sometimes the hands.
You just want to laugh at me like everyone else! Rocket, you're drunk, all right? No one's laughing at you.
The way it works is we kind of get in a groove and you sort of feel out what Rocket is like, and then it just starts to happen and you kind of zone into this Rocket world.
Whoa, whoa! What are you doing?
This vermin speaks of affairs he knows nothing about.
That is true.
He has no respect.
That is also true. Hold on. Keep calling me vermin, tough guy. You just want to laugh at me like everyone else. Rocket, you're drunk, all right? No one's laughing at you. He thinks I'm some stupid thing. He does. Well, I didn't ask to get made. I didn't ask to be torn apart and put back together over and over and turned into some little monster. Rocket, no one's calling you a monster. He called me vermin. She called me rodent. Let's see if you can laugh after 5 or 6 good shots to your frickin' No. 4 billion units. Rocket, come on, man. Hey, suck it up for one more lousy night and you're rich. Fine.
Para completar o grupo, a Marvel convidou o Vin Diesel para dar voz ao Groot. Como tinha apenas uma fala, ele topou o desafio de gravar em 6 línguas diferentes, incluindo o espanhol e o português. Apesar de Groot ter um vocabulário limitado, não quer dizer que ele diz sempre a mesma coisa. Por isso ele recebeu um roteiro secreto com tudo o que o personagem estava falando para encontrar a intenção correta.
I was just trying to feel what it felt like to be a 7.5-foot tree. And so this was the only kind of thing I could think of. And I wanted to really, really be ready if we had to do some incredible motion cap, which we'll probably end up doing in the next one.
Yeah,
you guys are here on a good day. We're doing something we've never done here in Hollywood. Never that I've seen. And what we're doing is saying the lines from the movie in the various respective languages. It's very cool. It's every actor's dream. Yo soy Groot. Moxie Groot. Eu sou Groot. Eu sou Groot. Eu sou Groot. Eu sou Groot. For me, it was at a very important time when I did this movie because it was in December. It was the first time I was coming around humans again and the first time I was working again. And there was something very therapeutic about, in my personal life, I guess in my professional life too, dealing with death and then playing a character that celebrates life in the way that Groot celebrates life.
No, Groot. You can't. You'll die. Why are you doing this? Why?
We are Groot.
James Gunn reuniu um grupo de atores incomuns, chamou atores de renome como Glenn Close e John C. Reilly para papéis menores e definiu Nebula e Ronan como os principais vilões. Porém, parece que ainda falta um personagem importante nessa história, certo? É a música.
Hey, put that away. Hey, listen to me, you big blue bastard. Take those headphones off. That's mine. Those belong in Impound, that tape, and that player is mine! Look, no feeling. Blue Swede, 1973, that song belongs to me!
Hooked on a feeling. I'm high on believing that you're in love with me.
The emotional core of this movie is the cassette tape that Peter Quill has that his mother gave him. It's his only attachment to Earth. It's his only attachment to the past he lost. It's the only attachment to his mother that he lost. So right away, that's a very important object. The songs on that tape were all songs that were written into the script that have stayed consistent from my first draft through the release of the film, because each of those songs is a story that is basically sung to Peter Quill by his mother about him. The music is also very important because we have a movie with outlandish characters in very strange worlds, and by giving them the people something as simple and as comforting as a 1970s pop song that we're familiar with, it helps to ease us into that strange place, while at the same time being a very novel experience to be listening to music while we're looking at somebody dancing through a dark temple of demons.
Cut. Great. Cut that. That's it. Cut. That is a main unit picture wrap on Christopher Pratt. And That is a main unit picture wrap on Guardians of the Galaxy.
It's starting to feel real that I'm starring in a Marvel movie. I mean, this is like pretty undeniable. Here we are in London, back where we shot the movie. Tonight's the night to really celebrate all the hard work that we put into making this thing, and you know, it's starting to feel real. I'm just really excited for a global audience to finally get to see this movie.
Apesar de todos os pontos de interrogação, o longa rapidamente tornou-se um dos maiores sucessos da história da Marvel, arrecadando 773 milhões de dólares ao redor do mundo. Em um momento do cinema recheado de sequências e reboots, Guardiões da Galáxia apresentou uma história original e única em um universo explorado apenas por filmes como Star Trek e Star Wars no cinema. Independentemente do nome dos personagens ou dos atores principais, nada vai superar uma boa história com heróis cativantes. A segunda fase do universo Marvel chega ao seu clímax com Vingadores: A Era de Ultron, um dos filmes mais complicados da história da Marvel. Apesar de ter sido um sucesso de bilheteria, o filme acabou tendo diversos problemas de bastidores e acabou resultando na impensável saída de Joss Whedon do estúdio. Não perca!